Mr. Wai-kwok.
Mr.
Chairman, I want to say that I support the passage of the Appropriation Bill 2015. The fourth debate has to do with housing and works and also transport. And as the member representing the engineering constituency in this council, I have to give some views. 106 CSAs have been moved by the Pan-Democrats under this session, and I want to refute their arguments. Now, we're talking about Hong Kong's long-term planning here. We need to invest resources in housing supply, developing new areas, and carrying out infrastructural projects. These are important for the sustainable development of Hong Kong. The government must carry out long-term planning. On the 9th of October 2013, on promoting sustainable development and promoting infrastructural development, I moved a motion debate, and I said that on the basis of Hong Kong Vision 2030, there should be long-term planning. The public had to be involved and engaged, and the motion was endorsed, unamended by the Council. So we can see that, in fact, most members in this Council do agree that there is a need to carry out long-term planning concerning land and housing supply, as well as the carrying out of infrastructural projects. These are the top priorities of this term of government. Under the LTHS, the total housing supply should be 480,000 flats in the next decade. That's the target. So we can see that the government is committed to providing adequate accommodation for the people of Hong Kong. But the success or otherwise of this policy depends on whether land can be made available in a timely manner. The CE has said that there is a shortage of land supply, and so there is a need to expand the Tung Chung New Town. There is a need to carry out long-term planning for Northeast NT and Lantau, and there is also a need to make land available in the Fanling North, Kutong North, and Hong Shui Kiu for development. But then I've warned that there may be hurdles in the way. In this council, we've experienced filibustering and also the movement of non-cooperation. Now, for example, for Lien Tang, Hung Yun Wei, the PWSC has voted down, and the government has also withdrawn the proposal to construct an artificial island. So, in fact, members have been blocking the passage of these items. But then Pan-Democrats accused the government of being incapable. I think it is important that there are enough manpower resources, including civil servants, to launch infrastructural and housing projects. We need to have adequate professional and technical staff. CEDD, Housing Department, DSD, WSD, EMSD, Transport Department, Highways Department. We need to rely on the expertise of the professional grades in these departments. Now, according to the union, there aren't enough resources. In fact, I've arranged a meeting between the Development Bureau and the unions. The unions representing the professional grades have been asking for an increase in the establishment. We need to make sure that we have adequate manpower resources. We have to make sure that these civil servants do not suffer from low morale. But then Pan-Democrats have acted in an outrageous manner. They are proposing cuts in resources for these departments. Yes, I understand that members may have some views concerning particular subheads, but I think requests should be reasonable and fair. Members keep asking the government to expedite housing projects, to provide adequate accommodation for the people of Hong Kong. And at the same time, they are proposing amendments to delete funding allocation for various bureaus and departments. If these unreasonable CSAs are passed, then the operation of the government will come to a halt, civil servants' morale will suffer, people's livelihood will also suffer. Now, concerning land and housing and also infrastructural development, there are amendments proposing to cut funding for these purposes. For example, Head 33 CEDD, Albert Chan has proposed amendments to slash funding for Kutong North and also Phase 1 design and site investigation. And then concerning the feasibility for the artificial island, again, and also the strategic study for the artificial island in the central waters. Again, Mr. Chan has proposed that such funding be cut. And then Head 62, Housing Department, Program 5, Support Services. Mr. Albert Chan has proposed to delete the funding for the follow-up work on the LTHS. He has also proposed to slash funding for identifying land for PRH development. And he has proposed to slash the funding for paying the salaries of all the 4 staff members. And then the Head 13A Development Bureau, Planning and Lands Branch, Mr. Chen Chi-chun has proposed to cut the funding for the branch from over $200 million a year to $1,000. So imagine the horrible consequences if this CSA is passed. Now, we've seen many public works projects being voted down by the PWSC, and now they are proposing to cut funding for staff resources to carry out follow-up work for housing and infrastructure projects. So how can we meet people's expectations and needs? How can we maintain the morale of civil servants? Now, last year, Pan-Democrats started a new wave of filibustering and a movement of non-cooperation. And the progress of the work of the PWSC and the ESC has been very slow. For 2013-2014, it was estimated that FC would allocate $43.2 billion for works projects, but a total of only $3.6 billion was allocated. But then when compared with the previous years, the figures were 160 billion and 90 billion. And in 2003, when there was SARS, $22 billion was approved for new projects. And for 2013-2014, only a small amount was allocated. And also, in the previous year, 57 contracts were awarded, but last year only 18, and the total amount was only $18.2 billion. The construction and engineering sector have suffered as a result, and the situation may be even worse this year. Many have complained about slippage and delay in infrastructural projects because of political bickering. And also, this year, we have a bunching up of construction projects, and as a result, there's a shortage of manpower, and there are some work types suffering from a very severe shortage of labor. But next year, the situation may be just the opposite. There may not be enough work for people in the sector. And as many as 70,000 people working in the construction and engineering sector may become unemployed or underemployed. And according to some estimates, the livelihood of the sector can be maintained if the government invests $70 billion a year in public works and infrastructural projects, and the private sector $180 billion. And over 10 organizations and institutions have set up the Construction Industry Alliance. I'm also a member. And in fact, we staged a protest against filibustering, and participants included construction workers as well as engineers and other building and architectural professionals. They are worried that the 360,000 employees in the sector will be affected, their livelihood will be affected, and including their family members. We're talking about over 1 million people. Now, in fact, some firms in the construction sector have made staff redundant because of reduced workload. Chairman, the non-cooperation movement and also filibustering by pan-Democrats as well as CSAs moved by members in the appropriation bill have caused delay to the progress of our infrastructural works. And pan-Democrats think they are justified. They keep saying that there should not be white elephant projects, and Hong Kong should not blindly strive for integration with the mainland. I think such accusations and allegations are totally unfounded. Look at the Guangzhou-Macau Hong Kong Macau-Zhuhai Bridge. Now, after a lot of discussion, the bridge was included as under the PWP in 2007. But then there was because of some support from the pan-Democrats, there was a judicial review, and finally the government won the case, and the bridge project could start. But then there was a total of 2 years delay, and the workers had to work overtime, and the construction timetable had to be compressed from 6 years to 5 years. Additional manpower resources and other resources had to be secured. So the government hopes that the delay can be shortened to 1 year. And out of the bill of $30.4 billion, $6.5 billion could be attributed to the JR and the subsequent delay. And I think what these people have done has led to a heavier and heavier burden on taxpayers' money. This bridge, the cost of this bridge, is shouldered by the 3 places. The bridge can promote sustainable economic development in all 3 places. And then with the completion of the bridge and also the Chuen Mun Chek Lap Kok link, Hong Kong will be able to develop bridgehead economy. And so the value of this bridge to Hong Kong is enormous. And then concerning Zhuhai, Chongshan, and Jiangmen, there are a lot of small and medium-sized Hong Kong enterprises operating there, and the bridge will benefit those enterprises. And financial services, logistics, trade, construction, tourism, retail, professional services, and the support services will all benefit from the bridge. So we shouldn't just say that the bridge is nothing but a white elephant. These people must not brush aside the contributions made to Hong Kong's economy by infrastructural works and the construction sector. Chairman, the longer the non-cooperation movement lasts, the more members filibuster, the more Hong Kong's economy and people's livelihood will suffer. So I hope that the pan-Democrats will repent and stop filibustering so as to benefit Hong Kong's long-term and sustainable economic development. Please do not obstruct progress and obstruct government's operation. We do not want traffic and transport and housing projects to be delayed. We do not want the development of the construction sector to be affected. We do not want employees in the construction sector to become unemployed. We do not want young people working in this sector to suffer from very gloomy prospects. So with these remarks, I support the appropriation bill and I oppose all the amendments. Mr. Tony Chair.
主席，喺呢個辯論嘅環節呢
Mr. Chairman,
In this round, 7 members together have moved 106 amendments to the bill involving the ASD, the Buildings Department, the Highways Department, so on and so forth, involving 15 items. I am going to vote down all these amendments because the purpose of these amendments is to cut the budget for all projects related to cut the salaries of the relevant secretaries, permanent secretaries, staff, and even the whole department. And some amendments seek to cut the estimates for some projects and related studies. These amendments are unrealistic and are in no way able to resolve the problems. Cutting the budget of these departments will not help to enhance the level of governance. It will add to the pressure faced by civil servants. It would deal blow to the morale of our staff, and it is not conducive to the overall interests of Hong Kong. Therefore, I am not going to support these amendments. Amendment number 58, 215, 213, and 216 seeks to cut the whole year salaries for staff of the ASD, BD, LD, and PD, and the amount involved is $4 billion. The government has been trying very hard to increase housing supply, and it's got short, medium, and long-term measures to increase housing supply. These departments are mainly responsible for implementing these measures and policies. The staff of these departments will have to bear the pressure, and given that they don't even have enough manpower to address the issues, and if we cut the expenses for paying these staff members, this is not really any solution. This will only aggravate the problem. The ASD, the BD, the HD, LD, and PD, well, their professional staff associations have reflected to me time and again the lack of manpower in their departments. For instance, the administration has introduced various measures and policies to enhance the quality of building management. The buildings department doesn't have enough professional staff to tackle the problem, and therefore in October 2013, their frontline staff staged a short-term strike to protest against the current situation because they have a severe shortage of staff, although the administration has boosted manpower recently. And then it was proposed that in 2015, the civil service establishment should be increased by 152 posts, but 145 posts are created to replace non-civil service contract staff. That means the net increase in posts of the BD is only 7, although the actual increase in manpower is not much. But I still hope that the administration can start this recruitment exercise ASAP so that these new blood can join the department as soon as possible. And last July, I wrote to the Secretary for Development to express my concern about the severe manpower shortage in the town planner grade of the planning department. To increase housing supply, the government has launched a number of new developments, including that in Northeast NT and Hong Shue Kiew, and also an artificial island to be built in Hong Kong waters, and to develop part of Lantau, and reclamation outside our harbor, and also development of cave-ins. However, to implement these projects, we must have enough land. Recently, people in the community have stronger views against new developments, and all these would require professional staff to follow up. Last week, I had a meeting with town planners, and once again, they reflected to me that their workload was ever increasing, and they have been working longer hours. Very often, they have to work until late at night, and occasionally, they even have to work on holidays. So I urge the administration to face up to these problems. There must be more resources to increase their manpower so as not to deal blow to the morale of the staff because of manpower shortage. Having talked about manpower shortage in the civil service, I'd like to talk about environmental protection. Amendment number 97 and 315 are proposed to cut the expenses on staff for the EPD for the whole year, and the money involved is over $1.14 billion. Of course, I'm against such amendments. The EPD has introduced a number of measures. For instance, blueprint for resources recycling, blueprint for improving our air quality, and food-wise campaign. And starting from the 1st of April this year, the levy on plastic bags has been extended to all the retail outlets in Hong Kong. And also there is also the producer responsibility scheme. All these measures need staff to implement. So cutting the provision for paying the staff is unrealistic. As regards improving our air quality, because electrical vehicles do not emit exhaust, do not have emissions. So people are encouraged to use electrical vehicles so as to lower emissions and to reduce greenhouse gases. At an FC meeting, I asked the administration whether it has reviewed its achievements in the promotion of electrical vehicles. We have 1,200 odd vehicle owners. They have been able to benefit. They were able to benefit from a waiver in first registration tax of electrical vehicles. I asked whether the government was happy with the current progress. Unfortunately, I was told that the administration did not have any target when this measure was first introduced. That was really surprising. With no targets, how can the administration quantify the success or otherwise of this measure? With no target, how can the administration decide the amount of supporting facilities needed for electrical vehicles? I urge the administration to take these issues seriously. Thank you. Mr. Gary Fan. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to speak on amendment number 180/60 subhead 000, that is to cut the provision, the half-year provision for paying the Director of Highways, Mr. Peter Lau, because I think he has been derelict in his duty. In January 2011, the SL government had an agreement signed formally with the MTRCL for construction of the Hong Kong section of the XRL at a length of 26 kilometers, and the original budget was $65 billion, and the unit cost was the highest among all the railways in the world. And according to the agreement, the project was supposed to be completed on the 4th of August this year, and that is just 3 months away. In 2010, oblivious to the strong objection in the community. The administration forced through the project, and it had been very lax in monitoring the project. Now there has been serious slippage, and for collocation of clearance and immigration facilities because of constitutional issues, this may not be feasible. So instead of having an express rail, we may end up having another through train rail. The Housing and Transport Bureau is responsible for monitoring this, and Mr. Peter Lau, the director, assumed office after the project started its construction a few months after the commencement of the construction. In May 2013, 3 years after the commencement of the project, the two most popular newspapers in Hong Kong reported that the project would suffer a slippage of at least 1 year, and the cost would overrun by over $4 billion. Back then, Professor Stephen Cheung came out to refute such reports. He said that the XRL would be completed as scheduled with no cost overrun. Hong Kong people were happy that eventually we had a major infrastructure project that would be on schedule with no cost overrun. And then in 2014 February, suddenly the MTRCL came out to announce that the project would be delayed for completion to 2017. Chairman, this is not just a project slippage. The Highways Department, led by Mr. Peter Lau, has been derelict in his duty when monitoring this project. He also has also hidden the facts from the upper echelon of the government, and he has also hidden these facts from the media and the community. First, after the XRL commenced, the Highways Department was already aware of the slippage. However, the news was not released to the public because 4 major contracts suffered some form of delay after the project commenced. The consultant submitted its monthly reports to the Highways Department, and the reports mentioned a number of times the slippage of these 4 projects, starting from 2011, December, a year or so after the start of the project. It was really known that the XRL may suffer some slippage, and alert was raised a number of times. And then in September 2012, that is about 2 years after the commencement, the consultant said there were no signs that the slippage would improve. And the Highways Department talked about, or the MTRCL talked about measures to catch up. These were not found to be used to be effective, those delay recovery measures. However, they continued to say that the XRL would be completed as scheduled. They did not inform the council or the community. They did not take further measures to monitor the project to ensure that it could be completed on time. So the Highways Department did not give an account to the public, and it did not report those delays to the Housing and Transport Bureau. Actually, the director is required to report to the secretary and also the PS the progress of the project. However, in December 2012, the expert report chaired by Justice Harmon pointed out that in the briefs there was no mention that there would be any delay, and therefore in May 2013, Professor Anthony Cheung blankly refused to say that there was any slippage. And then 2 months after he denied or he refuted such reports, he said that there may be a delay of almost 11 months to July 2016.
So even for the number of months of delay that has been pointed out by the monitoring consultant, and yet the director did not look into this, and there was no announcement made to the public to tell the public that what Anthony Cheung said earlier was wrong. And then on the 12th of November 2013, that is at the Railway Subcommittee, in the face of queries raised by members with regard to the issue of possible delay of the XRL, the Bureau Director was evasive. Well, they submitted a report. That was the 7th report. It's a half-yearly report on the XRL project, and in the final paragraph, once again, the administration reiterated that the administration would strive to ensure that the XRL project would be completed on schedule within the budget. And Mr. Peter Lau was also at the meeting of the Railway Subcommittee, but then there was no mention whatsoever about the fact that the Highways Department was already aware of the fact that because of the rock structure, it was delaying the project, and there was also no report to the Highways Department that there were delays or slippage in the XRL project, and that the railway could only be partially commissioned. And similarly, at the RSC meeting, Mr. Peter Lau also failed to report that to the committee. And finally, as there was no way to further cover up, the independent expert panel submitted a report, and repeatedly it pointed out that the Highways Department, in monitoring the works done by the MTRCL, it was negligent, and there was also a cover-up on the delay experience. But then the Highways Director was attempting to put up with a species argument in order to shirk his responsibilities. And now, and this year, on the 24th of March 2015, in investigating the background and also the reasons for the delay at the Select Committee, I criticized Mr. Peter Lau for his failure to report to the public in a timely manner with regard to the possible delay by 11 months of the XRL project. But then what did he say? Well, he said that the project delay did not necessarily mean that there would be a delay commissioning. In fact, with regard to the target completion date of 2016, there was still 2.5 years to go, and he personally thought that giving the chance to the MTRCL to catch up with the delay would be possible, and therefore he cannot categorically say that completing the project in 2016 was absolutely impossible. I think there was simply no justification for him to say that, and on that date there were members questioning Mr. Peter Lau why he thought that the MTRCL would be able to recover the delay. In fact, if you look at the performance of the MTRCL, the monitoring consultants had repeatedly reminded the Highways Department of the possible delay, and also he said that the effect of those DRMs would not be significant, and therefore, given the past track record of the MTRCL in the past, Mr. Peter Lau has chosen to blindly trust the MTRCL, believing that it would be able to recover the delay, and there was no objective basis for such a trust. So this is a wrong judgment, and therefore I think this is a blunder in terms of his professional judgment. What's more, Mr. Peter Lau learned from the consultant that there might be a possible delay of 11 months. He did not ask the MTRCL to review in depth the progress of the XRL project. That's why I am quite sure that Mr. Peter Lau trusted the MTRCL, and it was a blind trust. And given such blind trust, he chose to report to the THB as well as the public, and he tried to cover up the delay, and I think this is most ridiculous. Mr. Chairman, Highways Department, led by Mr. Peter Lau, was responsible for the monitoring of the XRL project, and instead of doing the job on their own, they would have to rely on the consultant, and as a result, both this council and the public have been kept in the dark. And in the end, we had this scandalous incident with the serious cost overrun. And if you read the news today, then you can see that the cost overrun could be up to 50% or even over $100 billion, and it would waste a lot of public money. And the director for highways, Mr. Peter Lau, after he was exposed to have been negligent, he said that, slippage does not necessarily result in delay, and he knowingly misreported the situation to us, and therefore he should be held accountable for his own mistake. And for the poor job done by the Highways Department in terms of monitoring, including the West Island Line and also the Sau-lan Line and the two other railways, there was also serious delay. And in the face of pressure, Mr. Peter Lau said that he would reserve the power to go after the MTRCL for such delays. But then for all the other railway projects which have experienced delays, what is going to happen? I do not see how the Highways Department is able to make preparation for a review of all the other projects. That's why I would like to move this amendment so that we would slash the pay for the director for 6 months, and that would serve as a penalty for the director, in particular for his incompetence in monitoring the XRL project, resulting in a waste of taxpayers' money in this most expensive project. I do not see any concrete results from that project, so I'd like to express my discontent towards the highways director. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm moving this amendment. These are my remarks. Ms. Sito. Thank you, Chairman. This is a difficult decision because I'd very much like to follow up on what Mr. Gary Fan just said about the XRL project on the cost overrun and also the progress delay. But then I must talk about my own amendment, and then for the XRL project, I'll leave that to later. Well, I'll be speaking on Head 44, Subhead 700, and it's about one expenditure. And this year, the budgeted amount is very small. I'm only slashing it by $100,000, but then for the total commitment, that would be up to $40 million. So that's about for the revitalization of the landfill. So it's a subsidy for the operator to revitalize the landfills. Well, first, a few words on the background. At the special FC meeting, Mr. Lee Cheuk-yen asked the question, and the reply number ENB 105 is about the revitalization of restored landfills, and there is a subsidy plan, and is to subsidize the operators. In fact, if you look at the whole thing, the administration has set aside $1 billion for the revitalization of the restored landfills, and the target is to ensure that for such landfill sites which cannot be used for housing, they can be turned into recreation sites, because right beneath the site is just rubbish, and there might be subsidence, and therefore it cannot be used for putting up buildings, and that's why they can only put up 1 to 2 stories structure on top of these sites. That's why using them as recreation sites would be the most appropriate use. And now they have got this plan, and under these plans, some projects have already been completed, and as a result, these landfill sites would be put out for NGOs to apply. And in the second phase, well, under this revitalization scheme is being done, and then for the first phase, some 6 sites were completed. Where are they? Well, Gingers Bay, and also Ngau-Chi-wan, Sai-Cho-wan, and Chun-wan, and these 6 sites together would add up to 114 hectares, and then for the usable site afterwards, only 34 hectares can be used. So it's just about 30%. Why? Because there are slopes and they cannot be used. But then during the first phase, under the revitalization scheme, they would be able to use up to 30% of the land. But then for the current plan, well, with 7 sites added together, well, the ratio would be a lot lower, and that would include Mayao-tong, Central Mayao-tong West, and Mayao-tong May, and Xiulam Shouqiang Stage 1, Stage 2, and Stage 3. So altogether, 206 hectares. All right, for the entire WKCD site, it's only 40 plus hectares. So it's about 5 times the site area of WKCD. Okay, after the site has been formed, all right, you can restore it and you can use it for some purposes. But then out of the 206 hectares of land, if you do some calculation, all right, some 25.6 hectares can be used. Again, the slopes have been set aside, but then the ratio is 9:1. So given the 206 hectares of land, only about 10% can be used. And in phase 1, according to our calculation, some 30% can be used. So how come in phase 2, after taking out the slopes, the land that can be used is so small in area? The administration has to justify it. All right, for the landfills, after they've been used for landfilling, is already a waste of land. But now we're talking about further wastage. How come it's 5 times the size of the WKCD, and yet only 10% of the area can be used for recreational purposes? But then if you look at the situation in June 2014, in a discussion paper submitted by the administration, there was no further explanation. And now for the $100,000, it will be incorporated in this year's budget, asking us to approve it. No, I don't think that's acceptable. In fact, it's not much more than $100,000. The whole thing would cost us $40 million. And how would that be spent? Once again, we will have to look at the $1 billion that has been set aside. According to their estimate, for those eligible groups, each one of them can get up to $100 million for the restoration or revitalization scheme, so that they can put up some works, for example, site investigation, consultancy works, or even put up some simple infrastructure facilities. All right, $100 million. So it would subsidize the community groups to do it. It's not a small amount. And also, if in the first 2 years, if there is an operating deficit, then the government would have to subsidize them in order to make up for the deficit. I think that's something that we will have to open our eyes and look into that very carefully, because for the subsidy for the operating deficit is about what we are talking about. That's the $40 million. All right. This year, they're going to give them $100,000 first for the advance works payment. All right. After coming to us in June last year, they haven't yet given us any further reply, and then they would circumvent the FC, and then they would just incorporate it as part of the budget in order to give them the money. That's why we have to single that out, so that we can put on record that we are putting questions to the Environment Bureau as well as the EPD as to how they would deal with this. And now they have come up with this target. So as I just said, for these landfill sites, after they have been restored, most of them would be used for green belts, leisure, recreation, and sports purposes. That we have no qualms about that whatsoever. But then we cannot but ask, how come it's done by the EPD and the ENB? All right, the EPD will only be acting in accordance with the TPO, the Town Planning Ordinance, and also the Environmental Protection Ordinance in scrutinizing these applications. But then that's not the purpose, because the sites will be used for leisure and recreation purposes. So only the Home Affairs Bureau should be responsible, and yet there is no communication whatsoever between the two bureaus. So the LCSD and the HAB do not have any role to play in this. So the ENB and the EPD, well, you're hoisting this flag, and you're scrutinizing the applications, and you're approving such lease for future uses. In fact, the ENB might not be competent to do that. So what you should have done is that you should have set out all the environmental conditions that they will have to meet, and then after the scrutiny is completed, then you should have handed it over to the LCSD and the HAB so that they will carry on to scrutinize the land application and also the service conditions and also the drafting of the agreement, instead of having the ENB doing everything.
But then we can see that there is a lack of communication and coordination between the two bureaus. So if the sites are to be used for sports purposes, then will it be for elite sports or popular sports? Of course, the Environment Bureau doesn't know, and so it will have to obtain the advice of the LCSD. But then we know that there are private clubs which only pay nominal rent or premium. And these private recreation clubs will be used by their members only, and in fact one such club in fact tries to make a profit out of its business. I think we must all learn from the painful experience in relation to private recreation leases. You have to make sure that the public will be given adequate access to the sports facilities. And in fact, in a panel, we had a motion proposing that for private recreation clubs in the urban area, they should or be relocated to the former landfill sites. Now, for these clubs in the urban area, some of them only pay $1 as rent per year, some only $1,000, and the facilities are primarily used by their members. Only very unpopular time slots are made available for public use, and the public, in fact, do not know what the slots are. Look at the cricket club on Austin Road, and also the club in Ho Man Tin, and also the club on Wong Nai Chung Road. Why can't these private recreation clubs be relocated to the former landfill sites? And also, Chairman, there are different bodies applying for the funding. These sites will mainly be used for green belts, for recreation, but let's look at which organizations were invited to join the site surveys. We have the Confucian Teaching Institute, the HKUST, two local organizations in Cheung Kwan O, and one of them, in fact, is a women's organization in Cheung Kwan O, and there is no information as to the work of this organization. And then there are a few private companies, the names of which contain the word green, so they may be involved in waste recycling or other activities. So the zoning should be green belt, open space, and recreation for these former landfill sites. And then how come different types of organizations were invited to join the site visits and surveys? Now, say if we or if the government allocates a site to this to one of the green resources company, and then will it be using the site for open space, for green belt, for recreation use? So it is quite likely that the sites will not be used for recreation and sports. But $100 million will be allocated to the organizations selected for site investigation and for putting up structures on the sites. So if these are private companies, how come they are given such favorable terms? And the $40 million will be used to offset the operating deficit of these companies during the initial years. So it's really problematic to include such funding in the appropriation bill. We've asked questions, but no replies have been given. I don't know whether Mr. Anthony Cheung has jotted down my question, and I don't know whether he will be telling the Secretary for the Environment that he should come to give me replies. This amount is about tens of millions of dollars, and this amount is bundled together with the appropriation bill, and no reasonable person will vote down the appropriation bill because it doesn't like this funding item. But I think the government is increasingly making use of these convoluted ways to bypass this council. So please send an SMS to Mr. Wong Kim Sing, Secretary. I'm concerned about Head 700. I want to have replies to the questions that I raised. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, is he present? The three members who have indicated that they would like to speak are not present. Ms. Sit-ho. Chairman, if that's the case, then I want to follow up on the points made by Mr. Gary Fan and others on cost overrun in relation to the XRL. Chairman. Now, in fact, questions that should have been asked in the FC have not been asked because of pressure from the pro-establishment members. And we were only given, at the later stage, 1 minute for questions and replies. Mr. Andrew Chang was a LegCo member at that time, and he was able to obtain from Ms. Eva Chang a 2-inch thick document. That was in the midst of FC meetings that he obtained the document, and the document was about roadworks planning in Yaochimong district. We were told that the information was extremely confidential, and only one copy could be made available and deposited with our library. And in fact, it was a very technical document, and there were many plans. So thanks to the insistence of Mr. Andrew Jiang, we were able to look at their plans for roadwork development in Yaochimong. And roads and roadworks relating to the XRL were classified as roadworks for the WKCD and for Yaochimong. But then because of cost overrun, of course, they could not say that the roadworks were related to the XRL. So we know that the railway, the XRL, is going to cost at least $90 billion. So can I ask Mr. Anthony Cheung where the $30 billion will come from? And how much funding cuts will be needed to recover the $30 billion? In the mainland, they have had a lot of express railway developments. There were the so-called 3 vertical railways and the 3 horizontal railways, and as a result, different cities in the mainland were connected, and the railway network was said to be extremely convenient. But then, soon after that, the officials in the Ministry of Railways had to step down. There were repeated accidents associated with the express railways, and the patronage level was much lower than expected. So I think the same may happen in Hong Kong. We used to talk about a 3-hour living circle, but in fact, if Hong Kong people want to take the express rail, I think the traveling time for them to take the express rail at Fu Tian will be about the same as the amount of time needed to take the express rail in West Kowloon. And this XRL Hong Kong section is not an express railway. In fact, the speed has to be slowed down when in the Hong Kong section. So Ms. Eva Chang and Mr. Anthony Cheung have failed to address society's concerns about the XRL. This is really a very bad situation. So is it that we should once and for all end all the harm done to Hong Kong by stopping the construction of the railway? I understand that there are consultancy studies on underground shopping malls in Causeway Bay, and then it is said that there should also be some underground shopping malls in Kowloon. I think the XRL terminus in West Kowloon enjoys an extremely favorable location. So for the excavated parts, let's turn them into an underground shopping mall. Because we do not know whether granite or soft soil will be discovered as drilling goes on further underground. So $90 billion may not be the final sum. So let's cap the loss by stopping the construction of the railway and changing the use of the site. I think we should at least begin to explore this option. In fact, we can see that in fact the geological conditions underground can be very complicated. In Central and Western, the underground situation was extremely complicated, alternate layers of soft soil and granite. And in Kowloon, when culverts and sewage pipes were constructed, hard granite layers were discovered underground. So why is it that for the site investigation of West Kowloon, there was no site investigation for the golf course? For the XRL, the government had to go to court to the contractor. The government lost and had to apply to FC for funding to pay the cost and the compensation. Now, in fact, the reporters are asking us this question: what will happen if the government goes to court against MTRCL one day? And I think Hong Kong people will be the ones who suffer if the government loses the court case. Then of course all the money will be paid out of taxpayers' money. And if the MTRCL loses the court case, it can rely on the support of the government. There are minority small shareholders who have bought MTRCL shares. They think the interest or the dividend payment is good. They think that the share prices will not drop too drastically. But then whether the government loses or wins, whether the MTRCL loses or wins, the taxpayers are those who will lose. very severely. So we can't have the government and the MTRCL going to court on the XRL. There are government officials sitting on the MTRCL board. How come they haven't detected the problems and haven't come up with solutions?
So, Mr. Chairman, as far as the XRL is concerned, it is high time we considered whether we should contain the loss. Some damage control should be done and stop its construction. And secondly, you must not shortchange taxpayers and use taxpayers' money to engage in a lawsuit with the MTRCL, because even if you give $10,000 per citizen per year, you won't be able to fill that pool. Mr. Lan Kwok-hung, thank you. Chairman, I have many amendments. Originally, I submitted a lot of amendments, but I have none in this round, thanks to you, Mr. Chairman. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I can bear the insult for higher goals. Now, Professor Anthony Cheung is here. Mr. Pt2 is not here. I wanted to cut his salary, but the letter is not here. I was asked by reporters outside the chamber about the Secretary for Development, Mr. Pt2. Mr. Pt2 said that ICAC has decided not to prosecute him. And the reporters asked me for my response. I said, I have nothing to do with ICAC. Maria Tam has been appointed by the government to monitor the work of the ICAC. So I referred the reporters to Maria Tam. So the question here is not about cutting the pay of Mr. Pt2. Well, Pt2, Secretary for Development, was nicknamed the secretary who hoarded land and who hoarded SDUs. Members here said that it was inappropriate to invoke the PNP, electrical PNP ordinance to investigate him, and that ICAC should be the gatekeeper. Whether a secretary who has been derelict in his duty is fit for this job, it is for this council to decide. And I think to hold him accountable, we should ask him about the SDU. Now, some members want to invoke the electrical PNP ordinance to look into the accusation of my receiving bribes from Mr. Jimmy Lai. That is very strange. All right, I'll go back to the amendments. Amendment number 108. Now, according to the government, we must have land to provide housing for the public. We have a lot of land. For instance, when there is a major structure project, we will have a site created. For instance, an artificial island next to the Hong Kong-Macau Bridge is a very expensive project. I think there are plenty of sites available and that can be used by the administration, such as the private recreational clubs pointed out by Ms. Ho. How come a club can occupy a big site at nominal fee, and how come people who are entitled to enjoy it cannot make use of these clubs? For instance, it is very difficult for them to use the facilities. The time slots are very unfriendly, for instance. So it is unreasonable. Why must we damage the ecology and spend so much time, so much money to reclaim land? And secondly, members who enjoy the facilities of these clubs are landholders. They employ various means to halt land in places like Northeast NT, waiting for compensation or reprovisioning. The government has changed its policy on new towns. These landowners are no longer eligible for exchange letters, so they have no choice but to leave the sites idle, even though they have already bought them. So Sau-lan has come to the rescue by launching a Northeast NT development plan. In the last round of debate, I already commented on this. There are 150 hectares of land there, but only a small amount would be spent on public housing. Because I commented on that already, I will not talk about that anymore. The question is, if at great pains we spend resources and manpower to damage our environment to get land, why doesn't our administration fulfill its duty by acquiring land which is so accessible? Now let's set aside the land for golf courses and other things. Mr. Chairman, you should understand that under the Land Resumption Ordinance is an imperial sword that can be used by the URA to resume land for redevelopment. And if we invoke the Land Resumption Ordinance to deal with developments like NT and other projects, now if Sau-lan really thinks that building housing is of paramount importance, then if we invoke Article 150 of the Basic Law by paying compensation at market rate, then it's in fact very cheap. We have so much land in the NT. How come the Secretary for Development, Paul Chen, hasn't advised the government to do so? And if the two secretaries claim that they don't have land for housing, why don't they put a joint pledge to the CE and ask him to invoke the Land Resumption Ordinance and Article 105 of the Basic Law to tackle the problem? Sau-lan said, and I quote, in 1997, or rather, no, not really in 1997. Yes, he said so in 1997. He said that housing is just like the shell of a snail. If people cannot protect their shell, then people are bound to revolt. And if they cannot have adequate housing, then there will be chaos in society or turmoil in society. So I'd like to ask the two secretaries, why have they not acquire land in this way? Why have they decided to use just a very small amount of land in NENT development for public housing? So I propose to cut the salary of the two secretaries. I think this is a very reasonable move. I think members of this council are not ignorant of this matter. You may be aware of the fact that I was scolded or verbally abused by a lady saying that I have occupied a PRH unit. Many members in this council have accused me of this. As I said, the housing department has ways and means to assess my income and assets. I have spent money on various social causes. These are expenses, and as a result, I am qualified to be a well-off tenant in a PRH unit. On the contrary, I have seen many legislators who were grassroots now living in luxury flats. For instance, Kwok-hung, he paid $5 million in one go to purchase a flat. He was able to buy it in one go. He has improved his quality of living. He has failed to improve the quality of life of those he claimed to fend for. Now, we must review the mechanism for PRH rental adjustment. The pro-establishment members here supported the administration in its legislative amendment, and that is a PRH rental must not be over 10% of the median income of PRH tenants. The amendments were passed, so this provision is no longer valid. And the Secretary has not reflected on this. Since the pro-establishment members have supported the move to remove this protective clause since 2010, we have seen a 20% increase in PRH rental, just to round up. So I've been attacked by many people that I have made Hong Kong people worse off. My position is we should not, or my position back then was, we should not support the amendment. But then I lost in the voting. And Mr. Cham Kam Lam said very strongly that he was against the legislative amendments. What did he say back then? DAB is of the view that the PRH rental should not exceed 10% of the median household income of PRH tenants. That was what he said. So how come his position has changed? You did say so. Or I'd like to ask you, why have you been so fickling? Now, I will allow you time to reply. What? He interrupted me. Please address the chairman. Or Mr. Cham Kam Lam, it's okay if you want to stand up and raise a protest. I don't mind. You can respond at any time. And then a few years afterwards, Kwok-hung, who scolds me so often, supported the legislative amendments. When Cham Kam Lam changed his position, Kwok-hung did not oppose. So the two together are really invincible. Mr. Lang, I think you have digressed. No. I am using my discretion to decide whether the pay of the two secretaries should be cut. So without such legislators, we won't have this kind of government. I cannot cut the pay of the two legislators. So I want to vindicate the secretary. So, secretary, please, in your response, in your reply, tell us whether you have followed the advice of the legislators or the other way around. Since the secretary has not done its utmost to serve the people of Hong Kong. Now, Chairman, you have to understand why I want to take the secretary accountable, because the Housing Authority is an independent body. When the Housing Authority claims that it has no money, what should be the response of the secretary? So as to ensure that rental should not be outrageously high to the effect that peerage tenants cannot afford it, as supported by Mr. Cham Kam Lam. So should the administration subsidize the HA or be farsighted enough to say that the labor market will revive sooner or later and therefore wages will increase?
So that rent should not exceed 10% of their median income, and still it would be viable. No, I don't think that's the case. In fact, by selling off assets to the linked REIT, I think the DAB has voted in the wrong way. So they are telling us that, well, if they don't have money or income from rentals, then they are not able to continue with their operation. I don't think that has anything to do with the bureau director's pay. Yes, it's related, because why has he not reviewed the situation? If you ask the DAB now, if you ask them, all right, under the fair adjustment mechanism, they are actually only increasing the fare without lowering it. All right, your time's up, Dr. K.K. Kwok. Chairman, I'm speaking on Amendment 584. All right, the Bureau Director is here just now on transport. In particular, on issues relating to the XRL, the Bureau Director was not here. That's why I'm repeating that again here. Dr. Kwok, your remarks, despite the fact that the Bureau Director was not here, is not an excuse for you to repeat those remarks again. So please do not repeat. No, I'm not going to do that. In fact, if you look at our transport policy, including the XRL and also the Hong Kong-Macau-Zhuhai Bridge, and also the upcoming 3RS, actually, these are the time bombs. So what I can say is that Bureau Director, it may not be under your control, because many of the decisions had been taken before you took office. In particular, the Hong Kong-Macau-Zhuhai Bridge and the XRL. But then 3RS would definitely be a decision taken during your term, and that would put Hong Kong people into a very difficult in a very difficult position, in particular financial viability. We would be put in a quagmire, because there is no way that we can still estimate the ultimate cost for the XRL. It can be as high as $90 billion. You will have to clarify it. It might be lower or a lot higher than $90 billion. So that would remind the public about this. How come the administration had decided to go ahead with the project despite all the queries and questions? So whether it's the Hong Kong-Macau-Zhuhai Bridge or the XRL, given the sorry state of affairs, how can we have any confidence in the 3RS? Because if you look at the 3RS, we still haven't been able to resolve the problems, in particular the EIA report. At the Airport Authority's press briefing today, well, we were told that by the end of the year, with regard to the 68 landings and takeoffs per hour, it would be nearing saturation. In fact, when we looked at the earlier report, we were told that there would be at least 82 landings and takeoffs per hour. The thing is, the biggest reason why we are not able to achieve that, that's because of the problem of the air war, and the administration still hasn't come up with any feasible reply to reassure the public about how they can achieve the target of increasing the landings and takeoffs. And people from different quarters, whether they are living in subdivided units, or for those better off who are living in PRH or HOS, and for the even better off, they are living in private housing, they are now having serious problems. In the latest demography report, in calculating some 378 cities globally, if you look at property prices and the cost to income, in fact, Hong Kong fares the worst. In other words, in 2014, the ratio was 17. In other words, for a person who works in Hong Kong, despite the fact that he spends nothing, he will have to, it will take him 17 years before he can buy a flat, when compared to London, which is the most expensive city in Europe. It takes 8.5 years for an individual to buy a flat. It's already, so we are almost double. So compare with what Sau-lan said when he took office. He said that under the LTHS, we will have to increase public housing supply, and he said that some 35,000 units can be built every year. And then if you look at the latest LTHS report, within the next 10 years, they would only be able to maintain some 296,000, and some 75,000 would be for PRH. And then the remaining 90,000 would be HOS or housing society flats. This is already outrageous. All right, they have not honored their promise. But then what is even more outrageous is that if you look at the audit report, it has been exposed that in 2012 they would only be able to build 180,000 units. In other words, the situation is not going to improve. In fact, the situation will only get worse. Well, under Sau-lan's housing policy, it said that between 2012 and 2016, apart from the 75,000 units that has been announced, well, some 35,000 units would be completed 1 year earlier. But then, clearly, again, they are telling lies, because there is no objective result, and there is no way that they can advance the completion date. So for those on the waiting list for public rental housing, they will still have to wait for a number of years before they can get a flat. And in the policy manifesto, he said that for elderly singletons applicants, the waiting time would be shortened. But then if you look at the LTHS committee report, well, for the quota for elderly housing, that would increase from 2,000 to 2,200. But then according to the audit report, by 2025, the waiting time for PRH would increase from 2.9 to 4.6 years. So the situation will only get worse. So when the government talks about the 3-year waiting time, they are again telling lies. So I don't quite understand why they can still propagate such lies. If you look at the figures, you understand it. Well, for the general waiting list, that is one of the there are 117,000 people on the general waiting list, and then for the 1P family or families with members who are not permanent resident, then together we're talking about over 200,000 or 220,000. And just taking the last year as an example, 2013 to 14, so there were 10,547 units completed, but then then there would only be 9,900 in 2014-15. So just doing simple arithmetics, if you look at the completion number before the end of this term of government, if the figure stays that way, then it will take another 15 years before we can allow all the 220,000 families on the waiting list now to get units. That has also not taken into account the fact that, well, in 5 to 10 years, for the newly added applicants on the waiting list, we have not taken that into account yet. So given the latest figures during the past 3 years, well, I think many of the figures have been inflated, and they are meant to cheat people. So who are able to get allocation of flats within 3 years? Well, for flats next to refuge collection point, those are units which have had murders or homicide cases and so on. So if they do not go for those units, then they will have to wait for a lot longer than 3 years. Okay, just put yourselves in their shoes. While you're waiting for a unit, if you're offered a flat next to the refuse collection point, or units that nobody would want, or units with murder cases and so on. So unless you are in dire strait, you would, of course, rather make this difficult decision. That is, you would rather wait for a bit longer, because the administration has told you that you would only need to wait for 3 years. So if I turn down that offer, then I might be able to get a slightly better unit, not really a lot better. But then by the time when they get the unit, it can be 7 years or more. The Housing Department has repeatedly said that many people have been able to get a unit within 3 years. In fact, they have totally ignored the facts. So has the Housing Department been able to build more flats, or is it just playing with figures? Because if you look at the last policy address of Donald Trump, well, in 2011 and 12, there would be 75,000 units completed within the next 5 years, so 15,000 units a year. And after the revival of the HOS scheme, well, starting from 2016-17, during the next 4 years, they would be providing some 17,000 units for the HOS scheme. But then if you look at the current figures, on the 19th of June 2013, in response to a question raised in this council, the number of flats that can be completed would be just 17,000. And then in 2016-17, including Shatin, Kwai-cheng, Chun-wan, Yunlong, 2,100. So when compared to the last term of government, what they have been doing is exactly the same. So the promises have not been honored. So whether it's the existing term of government or C.Y. Leung himself, well, what they have been doing is just to follow the targets left behind by the last term of government. So whether it's C.Y. Leung or Anthony Cheung, we don't know who has come up with these figures, but then they have tried to mislead the public by these figures. For example, increasing housing supply, saying that there would be some 35,000 units and they can be completed 1 year earlier. In fact, these are just empty promises. And what's even more unacceptable is that C.Y. Leung has repeatedly said that if you look at the per person area in public rental housing, and there he is even claiming that everybody is living in very small flat, and the very beautiful or rosy picture is that for PRH flats, or even in the private sector, the unit size should be increased. That's one of his promises. That's an expectation that he offers to Hong Kong people. All right, it's easier said than done. But then for many years, we've been asking them to redefine the per person space in public rental housing. They have been reluctant in doing so because they claim that by increasing that, there would only be more people applying for public rental housing. But then how come you still make that promise when you have no confidence whatsoever that you will be able to meet that? And then in private housing, it's even worse. Yes, everybody can increase his own living space, but then how can that be done? In private housing, property prices, well, since the start of this term of government, well, some have gone up by 30% or even 50% depending on which district you're living in. So unless you are really rich, or you are investors from the north, for an ordinary citizen in Hong Kong who has worked very hard, well, to be able to buy a flat, as he was promised in 2012 that if he got married back then and then he could raise a family, all right, if we wanted to buy a flat of 400 square feet, then using the amount of money that he had, he would only be able to buy a flat of 200 or even 300 square feet now. So they can just talk the talk, but then they would not be able to walk the walk. And what is most regrettable is about subdivided units. The administration has comprehensively investigated subdivided units territory-wide, and then they said that they would come up with targets of resolving this problem. But then if you look at the number of SDUs, well, last year it went up by 30%, 86,400 units. And Anthony Chung also said that the situation is pretty tight and there is no new housing supply to resolve the problem. That's why they cannot just phase them out overnight. So that has led us to look at this incident involving the Chin Wan industrial building where the residents have been evicted.
Some people say that the blame is on those living in subdivided flats. They are accused of wanting to jump the queue. They are accused of having unlawfully resided in industrial buildings. But if they had the choice, they would not have chosen to live in subdivided flats in industrial buildings. There were fire hazards, poor means of escape. So did they have any choice? Who forced them to live in substandard conditions? Bad housing policy and also promises that have not been delivered. And so we think that the pay of these officials should be cut. The meeting is now adjourned till 2:30 p.m. tomorrow.